Okay, well, my name's Bruce. This is Dave, for the newcomers who just came in. Dave didn't speak a lot about the topic. He basically gave a sermon. I really wish that you would have talked about personal experience, because I really want to know how you feel about personal experience. Maybe you could expound on what we talked about over the phone. I think that Dave said it's the weakest of the reasons to believe in Christianity, and that would be a great topic of why it was the weakest of the different reasons. Prophecy, he mentioned, is a good one. The Bible, of course, is the good one. The facts of the Bible, he mentioned a couple things that he believes are facts in the Bible. But the problem is that what Dave said could be used for any other religion. Bring a Buddhist in here, bring a Jainist, bring a Muslim. He could, all of the things that he said about people in his particular religion having a bad life and then believing it, and as good life comes along, could be used. So for any other religion, and anecdotal experience are just that. They're just anecdotal experiences, and I'm sure that people have these experiences all over the world. So we're all humans, and humans are fallible. In fact, that's one of the precepts of Christianity, is that we could be wrong, we could be bad. But what about personal revelation? Can our internal feelings be mistaken? A person's faith is so strong that they will ignore the fact that their personal revelation is just a feeling coming from their own brain versus a God. What about those other believers in a different God? Could they be all wrong? Could 1.6 billion Muslims be wrong? So if you think that to me, as a non-believer, reeks of egotism. It reeks of self-righteousness, narcissism, meaning that I want to get to my heaven and I'm going to believe whatever I want to, even by ignoring 1.6 other billion, and that's just one particular religion. It's the biggest religion in the world right now. That to me is just a selfish reason to believe. I really need more. And like all skeptics and all atheists, me as an atheist, I as an atheist can be convinced. Convince me. There is no difference between a Christian's personal revelation from any other's religion's personal revelation. Simply the belief that the Muslims are wrong, or they feel exactly the same thing I have a feeling of when I have my personal revelation, but they don't have a God, or they have a false God, is to me somewhat ignorant, because these people are just as serious, just as much as a believer as any Christian. Take the 44,000 sects of Christians, and each of them have a revelation saying that their particular brand of Christianity is true. It's simply selfish. If you have an argument against another religion, the same argument has just as much validational power when used against your own religion. For instance, look at this discussion we're having tonight, and look at it from an Egyptian point of view, or an Indian point of view, from India. They're going to have exactly the same position, calling those Christians wrong. Exactly the same arguments that Dave had, all anecdotal arguments, would be placed against Christianity. So when a person of faith has a personal revelation that they feel is from God, they might be afraid to discount it as just a feeling, because they believe that their God gave them this feeling directly, so it must be truly a message from God. But again, back up and find out that any other religion can use that particular argument. And we're all geographically disposed to believe in a religion that we are close to. If anyone here is a Christian now, but you grew up in Egypt, I doubt very much that you'd be a Christian. I once talked with a Christian about a possible revelation to him that God would tell him to do harm to others. His response: he would look it up in the Bible to see if there's a corresponding Bible verse. But wait a second. If this is truly that God was talking to him, why would he want to go to a Bible verse? If he really thought it was God that was talking to him, he would accept it unconditionally. Why validate it? What if God had something new to say that isn't in the Bible? Or what if there was no Bible verse that was corresponding to his particular command from God? So I question anybody who says, I have a doubt, I get this beautiful feeling that God is inside of me telling me a message, and he goes to the Bible. Well, that's just a story. Suppose you receive a message from God, and then later discovered that it was, well, just a feeling, and not from God. If one made a mistake with one revelation, maybe it's a good idea to doubt them all, or which one is true. If you're having a serious problem in your family life or business or just a personal problem, and you pray to God for a particular answer, and he guides you somewhere, and it gets worse, is God trying to make it worse for you? Are you the next Job? Suppose that a Christian receives important revelation from a deity, and this person's best trusted Christian friend, or even a Christian leader, receives an opposite revelation. What are you going to do when your own minister says, no, that can't be, because God wouldn't say something like that, even though you got a particular revelation from God? Personal revelation is a very dangerous thing, as I'll show you soon, as we can see from others that have received personal revelation to do harm. About 15 years ago, Andrea Gates killed her 4 children because she received a message from God. And I know what you might say. She was freaking nuts. But what if she wasn't? What if her 4 children were going to be the next Adolf Hitlers, and they were going to take over the world? And God was really saying, hey, Andrea, your kids are going to grow up to take over the world and make it a much worse place. You have to kill them now, because if you don't, it's going to be a much worse place. If that was really a message from God, then she was perfectly right in killing those kids. She would sacrifice herself. Everybody calling her nuts, but she knows to herself that God told her this. We don't know that for sure. Jim Jones killed hundreds. Last year, a minister killed his own son in Boston because he was just about to leave the church, and God told him to kill his own son. Actually, it says that in the Bible. Christian Scientists, as well as many other moderate Christians, pray for their children instead of taking them to the hospital. This happens to be one of my pet peeves that most of you, even if you're Christian, would agree with, that 17 U.S. states has a clause built into it by Nixon's staff that you cannot be prosecuted if your children die in front of you if it's a religious reason why you didn't take them to the hospital. 17 states still have that rule on the books. That means you can't be prosecuted, you can't be fined, you can't be sent to social services, you can have other children, let them die, and the state can do absolutely nothing. Now, I think that everybody would agree that these should be changed, but the Christian Scientists that were working under Nixon at the time put this in place. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect just Christian Scientists. It creates a whole reason to let your children die. And most of these are bacterial problems where they can get a shot within 1 hour of death, and they could still be revived. If your revelation is truly from God, could he purposely be deceiving you for a greater good of a future event? Possible. And how could you tell if God was not deceiving you? You have to trust God, but then we're all fallible. Could it be that humans just have a complex brain that can produce vast quantities of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin? I feel it right now. Just being part of a discussion, being able to speak, I get a rush of dopamine. It's somewhat selfish, I agree. But I'm the boss of Backyard Skeptics, so I kind of have a little reward there. I had part of a Harley group. I got a huge round of applause for the great work I'm doing, and I could just feel that dopamine going through my body. It was really great. And I said to the group, thank you for that dose of dopamine. And everybody applauded again. So it was really fun. Could it be that humans have a complex brain and can produce vast quantities of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin on demand, but especially when one closes their eyes, goes into a particular meditative state, and waits for the inevitable rush of these chemicals? I know how it feels from a heavy LSD type trip I had when I was practicing transcendental meditation in my teens. Now, I took LSD twice as a kid, and this transcendental meditation trip was greater than the chemicals that were induced by LSD as a kid. That was in the 60s. Yes, I grew up in the 60s. I see some people here grew up in the 60s as well.
Well, if I recall, if you remember the 60s, you weren't part of them.
Good one. So how do we know? I'm almost done. So how do we know when something that seems supernatural, like a personal experience, is not supernatural, but brain-given to our bodies? I once believed that these chemicals were from somewhere else, the great Buddha in the sky, or make up your own spiritual definition. I now know and understand that it was my brain alone that was doing it. I'm a dualist. I'm not a dualist. A dualist is one who believes in separation of mind and brain. Your mind is separate than your brain. When your brain dies, for some reason, your spirit or your mind keeps on going. When the greatest thing about being a non-dualist is, or one that thinks there is no separation of mind and brain, when I look at a glowing sunset, or that special smile from my wife, or riding a Harley in a beautiful area with my friends, I feel those chemicals. But the difference between me and a dualist is that I know where those chemicals are coming from, and it's not from God. It's my brain, and I can still appreciate life and my purpose in this world to make it better when I came into it, better than when I came into it. Thank you.